You know, I was thinking though, when we were talking about, you know, the importance of landscape. Your first 40 Words for Sorrow first came to my attention when your editor sent me a quote from Toni Hillerman.
Yeah.
She was so excited about that, and I thought at the time, it's interesting that she would have sent it to Tony. I mean, why is she asking
She didn't know him. She didn't know him. She just thought that he would respond. Because
well, he did.
Yeah, I was knocked out.
But
almost literally, I was under the.
Really?
Yeah, when she called to tell me to read me the quote, I was under the desk looking for the pen I had just dropped, and she told me the quote, and I banged my head on the desk and nearly knocked myself out. I was so amazed by what he said. Yeah, it was.
Well, I couldn't figure out why Tony, you know, because I hadn't seen the book at that point, and I thought, okay, Marion must believe that this is a book in which there's a landscape and a culture that predominate more than character, because Tony is kind of the go-to guy if you want to do that. So I was prepared then when your book came in for, you know, for me to read, that it would be that sort of book, and indeed it was. Anyway, 40 Words for Sorrow was first, and then in the second book, A Delicate Storm. Why is it you think that that book won so much critical acclaim?
Well, to be honest, I think there's a funny thing with awards. There's a lot of funny things about awards, but one of the things that a lot of people have noticed is that authors win awards for the wrong books all the time. It happens a lot. In literary fiction, you see it with Ian McEwan not winning the awards for Enduring Love, but winning them for Atonement, which to me is a much inferior book to Enduring Love. I think is an absolute masterpiece, and the Child in Time, or Ann Tyler wins it for not for Dinner at the Homesick Restaurant or for The Accidental Tourist. She wins the Pulitzer or the National Book Award for Breathing Lessons, which was forgettable compared to those two brilliant books. And I think that 40 Words for Sorrow was a better book in some ways. I don't want to disown any of my literary children, but I think that it was a better book in some ways. And it won the Dagger, but in Canada it didn't win the Arthur Ellis. And I think people kind of said, well, that really should have won that year, so we'll give it to this one this year, or try to. And
sometimes it depends on the competition, what else was up, or the composition of the awards committee. I mean, I agree with you there. I wasn't actually thinking about awards so much as just critical reaction. I mean, sometimes the best reviewed books of the year never come up for awards at all.
That's
so
true.
I don't equate, you know, awards with that. But I just thought it was interesting that.
Well, I think it goes to setting, partly that we were talking about before. The Delicate Storm, of all four Cardinal novels, probably makes the most advantage of the winter up there. Specifically, I wanted to use the ice storm of 1998. It's not set in 1998, but I wanted to use that massive ice storm. If you remember the photographs that were on the front pages around the world of these huge electric towers just crumpled under the weight of the ice. And one of my favorite photographs was of a diesel train in the middle of Main Street of a Canadian town, because they were using it as a generator for electricity, because they were without electricity for so long. It was just a dramatic climatic event, and I thought that could really cause havoc for for an investigation. And in fact, I was so anxious to use it that when I wrote the first draft, I had that beginning right on page 1, and then I realized as I got halfway into the book, well, they can't do anything. They can't drive anywhere. They can't, they can't go to Toronto for forensics. They can't get anything done. So I had to rewrite the whole thing and have it start a little slower.
That's true. You can't derail the case if it never left the station.
It's got to get going first. So now I have it building, and it really hits home about 3/4 of the way through the book. So I think there's that aspect of setting the climate and that cataclysm. But also, it uses the Canadianness of the series the most, because it revolves around a piece of Canadian history, the FLQ crisis of 1970, which was the first political kidnapping in North America. The Front de Libération de Québec kidnapped a British trade consul and a provincial minister of labor, and held them hostage for months. And Pierre Elliott Trudeau called out the army into Quebec and invoked the War Measures Act, emergency measures, and rounded up 500 people and threw them in jail as suspects. It was a traumatic event in Canadian history, and one that people around the world, if they ever knew about it, have forgotten. It's receded in the mists of time behind far worse terrorist acts that have occurred since. But it brought Canada more to life, I think, as a place with its own history and its own interesting politics. I hear from a lot of readers saying they find it fascinating. When I was in Germany, they asked endless questions about the relationship of French Canada and English Canada, which actually goes right to the title. That's why it's called The Delicate Storm.
Right.
Partly because of the ice storm, where people who live through that say the thing they remember most is the sound of trees falling and crashing, branches breaking, everything being so fragile. So there was that, but also the delicate storm of that relationship between French and English Canada.
Is the separationist movement a little bit quiescent at the moment?
Yeah, it is. It is, because they've gotten everything they wanted except nationhood.
Right.
In the 1960s, Montreal wasn't all that French a place, and if you were a young French-Canadian man, I think unemployment was around 50% for them around then. It was horrible. They couldn't get work in their own town, and their own language was a second-class language in the place. And, they were angry about that. And not because of the FLQ events, but because shortly after that, the Parti Québécois came to the fore and got in power. They won all sorts of language protection rights, and brought their culture just front and center. Now, if you go to Montreal, no doubt you're in a Canadian
Absolutely not. Now,
place.
we've traveled there quite a bit, and luckily I speak French, so I've always been fine. But it seemed to me the last time I was there, compared to a few years ago, that the whole sort of militant feeling was largely dissipated, and people were just kind of getting on. It's kind of like going to Ireland last March. We noticed that, that because there's so much money pouring into Ireland from the EU and all, that they're all now sort of more focused on making money and being prosperous and reversing immigration and all those things, and a huge amount of that, what looked like intractable problem, was just kind of being washed away by solvents, including prosperity.
Right.
And I wondered if that were also true for French Canada.
Well, luckily, it never got to anything like Ireland.
No.
People were tired of their relatives being killed, their sons and daughters, and innocent people being murdered.
Well, one hopes that Ireland will work it out.
The women of Ireland are largely to thank for the peace over there. The mothers of people, they were the ones who protested and protested and protested and protested, and really kept the peace movement going.
Well, one is thankful that it didn't come to such a pass. In French Canada, because splitting it up, I think, would have been really an unfortunate thing.
It would be sad. It would be sad. If they really want to go, then I hope they go. You don't want to keep them in by force. You can't. You don't want to turn into the Balkans. But on the other hand, it's sad because tribalism is such a negative force in the world.
It really is.
It's one thing when you really have to become tribal to survive, which is how it developed, of course. But when it's just a matter of being able to say you have your own country, even though you want to have the same currency, you want to have everything else to be the same, you just want to have your separate government, and that you will gain nothing and in fact lose tremendous economic advantage of being part of the country. It just makes no sense. Well,
one hopes that it will move on, but anyway, you moved on from this ice storm and all the rest. Black fly season, by its nature, implies that in fact we're in a warm. I think the black flies in eastern Canada are just.
They're horrendous,
They are just awful. I can remember going to the New Brunswick woods and, rushing right back out again and burrowing insect repellent. And
it's horrible. It's horrible.
That's a nightmare.
Yeah, I remember them vividly from, people asked me if I did research. I said I didn't have to do any. I remember them vividly from growing up in North Bay. Oh, you just can't go out in the woods in May or early June. It's just... they're not like mosquitoes. They actually take a little piece of your flesh,
Yeah, no, they're really vicious. But I thought it was interesting that you moved to a whole different season and a whole different set, in fact, of extreme problems that Algonquin Bay, I'm going to do this, that Algonquin Bay would experience. So you're still taking advantage of these.
In fact, people said to me, stop, you're going to ruin the tourist trade up here, because nobody will come up here anymore. They see the ice and black flies and that sort of stuff.
All that good stuff.
Yeah.